all, and welcome back to another wonderful video. Today I'm here in this random Discord server with these interesting looking characters here because we're back with Species in Depth. That's right, excited to jump back into reviewing and overall talking about different species and Ponytown and everything like that. So, like I said, Species in Depth is back. We're going to try to do this weekly and everything like that for a little bit, and then maybe we can close that off for another season or so or something like that. And then maybe we can do something else with Species in Depth, something new. And if you have any ideas for Species in Depth that you may want me to try, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. Unfortunately, I'll be alone for this one. I'm thinking about like getting different hosts, like co-hosts per episode or something like that. Maybe like, you know, for example, today we're going to be covering the Kanza. Perhaps if I had done this for a future episode, perhaps I could have gotten the Kanza leader to hop in and join and everything like that. Or perhaps I could just get someone else, just some random person that owns a species or something like that to join me in different episodes of Species in Depth. But today we're going to do it alone, and today we're going to be talking about the Kanza. Now, the Kanza are an interesting species when it comes to the lore, but we'll talk about that in a moment. What they really shine and excel at is the lore. They have quite a bit of lore, so much lore that it's actually, if we go to the lore channel here, the little lore channel, we go to that, it's actually a series of doc sheets. Now, this is something that I have I absolutely hate. I absolutely hate that it's a Google Doc sheet. Actually clicking on it and going to it, and which I will do in a moment, I can kind of see why. It's because it's like 9 to 10 pages, which we won't go over all 10 pages, by the way, because I've already went through this once, and then the power went out, and I lost all of this footage. So I kind of already know all my critiques and everything that I want to talk about for this species. So this will actually be a little bit of a shorter episode as well. But suffice it to say, there is a ton of lore. So much lore, it's insane. There's like 10 full pages of it just on this full Kanza lore doc sheet. I don't know about these other 3 or anything like that. And everything, and I honestly didn't go through those in the previous recording and everything like that, which we won't do in this one either. I highly encourage you, if you're interested, to try to get in contact with the species and hopefully get your own Kanza and get access to the lore and everything like that, because it's actually quite interesting. It's very, very interesting, and there's quite a bit of it. So anyway, like I said, I really hate the fact that these are Google Doc sheets for a number of reasons. For one, I hate the fact that not only do you have to have Discord to get access to the species, how to make them, the lore, this, that, or whatever, but you also have to go through another thing after going into Discord to get even more information on the lore, and that's a little bit over the top. And again, I kind of understand it, because if we click on this, which I'm going to do now, yep, I know it's a suspicious link, but I know I've already clicked on it once, so I already know. But clicking on this, you'll see that there's actually like 9 pages on this thing. It's insane how many pages there are on this. So let's scroll down a little bit here, and I'll show you that it's like 9 pages long. There's 9 pages of lore and information on this, and that's just the full lore as a whole. Another reason why I hate like doc sheets and stuff like that is because a lot of the times people can come in here and edit things or do this or do that to it, and if it was on Discord, there would be absolutely no way for anyone ever to edit it other than the original author. Of course, there's ways to lock that and everything like that, but personally, I think that, you know, giving anyone that much chance of it is a little bit risky as well. It's very easy for someone to do different things to the, you know, the lore and everything like that, especially if you can somehow like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right to use doc sheets and everything like that to display your lore. I'm kind of glad they did it in this case because it's 9 pages long, but at the same time, I kind of hate that. I kind of wish it would have just been like each channel had its own, like right here, each channel had its own, you know, page, essentially. Not necessarily a page, but as you can see here, if I go back to the actual doc sheet, each of these things are kind of separated in chapters. I think it would have been interesting and just as okay for them to separate things into a category with full Kanza lore category, and then underneath that is, in that category, is each chapter in that doc sheet, and then the next channel is hybrid Kanza, and then each chapter and that one is a different channel in that category, and so on and so on. I think that would have been a good way to do that if you wanted to keep it on Discord. I can kind of see why you would want to keep it on the doc sheet for now, though, because like I said, there's just so much here. It would have taken just as much work to separate that and everything like that. So that's all really I have to say about that. But anyway, let's move on to Kanza. Oh yeah, another thing too about doc sheets is they always they're always like so freaking small for me. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this. Kanzas are creatures with white bodies that have spots or stripes and different shades of gray. They are mostly ponies mixed with parrots, the birds of bright, colorful feathers that give Kanza their wings, feather tails, and feathered marks. The birds represent freedom and power, and Kanza get their playful, smart, and curious behaviors from parrots. Unlike other species, Kanza must always be happy and friendly to others. For those who have seen the episode where Discord starts to fade because he was being peaceful and healed once he was chaotic again, it's much like that. And as I said in my original recording, this line right here where it's like sort of like the Discord rules is something that I absolutely love, because I haven't seen that in a species yet, and I really haven't seen it in much places other than in My Little Pony and everything like that. It's a really interesting concept where they have to be happy, they have to be friendly. If they don't, they start to fade away, just like how Discord works. It's so interesting, and I love that. It's crazy. It's amazing. I love that a species is taking that concept and using it in a new, interesting way. And it's great. These cons are almost like a symbol of peace and happiness and everything like that because of that. And it's just great. I don't know what it is about it, but I just love that. Unfortunately, though, the species as it is kind of just a Pegasus. It's kind of just a Pegasus with extra parts. If that makes sense, because as it says here, it's mostly ponies mixed with parrots. So you're basically mixing ponies and birds, combining them, and getting something that's not a Pegasus. I don't know how you're getting something that's not a Pegasus, but you're getting something that's not a Pegasus. You're getting a Kanza. Now, I will say this: they do have, extra things that, like the Pegasus don't have, such as, feathery tails, feathery marks, feathery things on their body other than just their wings. Whereas Pegasus in the show and in the Ponytown and things like that, they don't really have that many feathery parts. They just have the wings and that's it, which makes sense. So it is interesting that they at least added a little bit of extra bird in there. So I would like to compare the Kanza to a Pegasus that's just like 60 to 70% more bird than they are pony. That's probably how I would describe them. And honestly, I don't really like that very much because, again, it's not super unique in that sense, because again, it's basically a Pegasus and I don't like that. I mean, I love the species because they have a ton of lore here. The lore here is amazing and great, but because they're basically just Pegasus, it kind of ruins part of it for me. And I think that's something that is going to drive people away from not joining the species overall. But anyway, moving on, there's actually multiple types of Kanza. There's 3 main types. There's neutral, feathered, and furred. Here are some pictures of Star as all 3 types. So this character here is called Star, and it's showing them as each type. So here is the neutral version, which is apparently the most balanced. The feathered version, which is the strongest. More on that in a second. And the fur, which is apparently the strongest. So, I mean, the fastest. The fur is the fastest, and that brings me to my point. So, feathered version, I think, in my opinion, should be the fastest, and I think the furred should be the strongest, because birds in like real life have hollow bones and weak bones. They're normally just weak. Like, birds are just a fragile species in of themselves. Like, birds are extremely fragile. They die really easily. That's why you can't really keep one as a pet for very long, because it's hard because they're very fragile and things like that. So I think that the feathered should be the fastest, not the strongest. And the fur should be the strongest, not the fastest. The neutral one is just the most balanced. That makes sense. But more on the neutral one, they are the most common type of Kanza. They have a more balanced speed, strength, and diet, making them better at adapting to changes. They also have more power and energy inside of them, making learning their abilities faster and easier. While they don't normally become too powerful, they need to use it regularly to avoid 2 things: overloading and draining. Using their energy too much will drain it, and the less they have left, the longer it takes to recharge. If they don't use any energy, they can lose control of it at high levels, possibly explode if they use too much at once. Like, if they use too much, they can explode and have seizures and die for not being able to contain it. It's very rare though, and overloading is a slow process. So as I said in my original video before the power went out and I lost everything, this reminds me very much of the Fairly Odd Parents, where the fairies have to grant wishes X amount of time. If they don't, they get an overload of magic and they eventually explode and die. So not making wishes makes them die. This is something similar to that, where in the sense of they have this energy, this magic energy, this power inside of them, and if they don't use it, they will explode and die. But if they use too much of it, well, they'll become really weak and slow, and they won't have that energy and that strength, and it will take them a while to build it back up. This is a really nice thing. I really love this, and it's amazing. I kind of wish other species would do something similar, although obviously I don't kind of want them to do that now, because obviously the Kanza have done this first, so, or at least first to me anyway. But anyway, moving on to the feathered, they are the strongest Kanza. They have very strong beaks and claws, tough bones, which is unrealistic in my opinion. I don't know why it would be tough bones. I think it should be hollow bones, making them faster, and powerful wings. Their wings and tail can resist much more damage than the others, as if they were made of metal. Since they are so heavy, they naturally get stronger to be able to carry that weight around. The feathered Kanza have a fruit, vegetable, and nut-based diet and cannot eat anything else, or they will faint, have a stroke, and die. Most of them are lucky, since they usually just throw it up right away, though. So you're not normally going to, if they eat this wrong thing, you're not going to immediately die or something like that. There's usually a chance that they're going to throw it up and be able to recover from that. But it is interesting that they have like this very specific diet where, there is rare cases where they might try to stray from that diet, and if they do, they just die. So I think that's pretty interesting. But again, I kind of like the idea of like the feathered ones, being strong in the sense that their wings are like basically made of metal because of how strong the wings are because of magic or whatever else. But I don't like the idea of them having like really thick, strong bones, because that completely contradicts the bird nature of them. I definitely like the idea of them being able to use their wings defensively or something like that, but I don't feel like that should make them the strongest. I think they should just be the fastest with hollow bones, and perhaps maybe they do have strong beaks or claws or something like that. But overall, having like really tough, thick bones just doesn't make sense for the feathered Kanza, and that is honestly my personal opinion on that, because it is contradictory to their bird nature and everything like that. But moving on to the furred are the smaller and faster of the Kanza. Unlike the others, this type can represent any animal, only mammals though, however. So each one can look different from the others. They are the most energetic, but tire out instead of becoming stronger. They have lighter bones so they can run faster, but that also means they're more likely to break. Most of them have better hearing, sense of smell, and eyesight than the others. The furred Kanza can only eat meat, the exact opposite of the feathered Kanza. If they eat something that isn't meat, they will be poisoned and either get greatly sick or just die. So again, this feels like they put the furred lore in the feathered one, and the feathered one and the furred one, or something like that. Like they swapped them or something like that. It literally says that they have lighter bones, making them faster. But in nature, birds have the lighter bones, the hollow bones. So it kind of feels contradictory again, like where it's like this specific part of the furred should be in the feathered, and this specific strong part of the feathered should go into the furred or something like that, because it feels like that's where it belongs, but it's like opposite, and that makes it a little bit harder to remember for me and everything like that. And honestly, it's kind of nitpicky in a way, but it just feels like it should just make more sense that way than it does this way. But back to the furred, I do like the idea that they can, sort of represent other animals and stuff like that, so they don't have to necessarily be the Pegasus with extra Pegasus inside. They can be, a Pegasus with extra horse, or Pegasus with extra cat or something like that, because they can represent any other animal as long as they're mammal. So that's pretty interesting, and I kind of like that. But at the same time, I feel like that is slightly lazy in a way. The reason why I think it's slightly lazy is because you're putting the species onto another person, essentially, to do the work. And the reason why I say that is because there's so many species where it's like, I'm a deer, but I have magic crystals on my horns. Or like, I'm a cat, but I'm also a cat dog or something like that. And then people like just take two random animals in nature and combine them and call them a species. And I feel like that's exactly what this is doing, where it's like the furred variant of the Kanza is like take the Kanza, take any existing mammal and combine them, boom, you have a furred Kanza. And it feels like it. I've never liked that concept for making species, where it's like you take one animal, take another animal, combine them, boom, species. I like the idea of them being full-on original, where you can kind of compare them to two animals, but they're so different from those two animals that it doesn't really make sense. It's just an appearance thing, like, oh, it kind of looks like a lizard, and it also kind of looks like a dragon, but it's definitely not a lizard-dragon fusion or anything like that. It just kind of slightly looks like that or something. And that's my big complaint about species overall, and that's kind of one of my complaints about this furred variant, where it's just like, yeah, it's still a Kanza, but it's kind of a Kanza monkey or a Kanza dog or something like that. It just feels like you're you give them the freedom, and I like that, but I just feel like it's just lazy in a way, just like a small way. Not a huge thing. Again, it feels nitpicky in a way, but that's just how I see that. But anyway, we get on to the second chapter, which is why the gray spots. It talks about the different shades of gray are a sign of knowledge, which I find very interesting. While it's uncommon for Kanza to be born with dark spots, it is possible. Lighter shades mean they have young and innocent minds, while darker shades mean they have more experience. It has nothing to do with their personality or their age. Only those two things can affect the spot's color. Kanza have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years, so it's impossible for them to become elders and pass on the black spots. There are only a few elders in this dimension, each immortal and about 700 years old. So this is where things kind of start getting a little bit contradictory to earlier statements. This one literally contradicts the previous statement, where it literally says Kanza have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years, so it's impossible for them to become elders and pass on the black spots. But then it says there's also only a few elders in this dimension, each immortal and 700 years old. I find that interesting that is put right there. There's a little bit of an explanation later on, kind of, but I think that should have just been removed, this little highlighted part here. It either should have been removed or it should have been put in before the Kanza lifespan thing, where it says something like, there are a few elders in this dimension that are immortal, that are about 700 years old, but it is impossible for them to pass on their black spots or become elders unless they do this or that or whatever. Because it basically says it's impossible for them to become elders, and then it basically explains how to become an elder. So anyway, the elders are the wisest and most experienced. They are an elder once their spots are black, which then moves the fading to the white fur, making it gray too. The second phase is often called a second life, even though it's the same Kanza and nothing else changed. Here is Star as an elder. You can see there's black spots there, mostly gray. Once they turn completely black, they become a shadow guardian. The elder is no longer alive, as the transformation will kill them and turn their bodies into a husk, and the core of their soul spirals into a bright ball of energy, which then forms the new Shadow Guardian. This is Star as a Shadow Guardian, by the way, so that's what that looks like. I think that looks freaking amazing. I love this look. It says that the glow is her soul color and not her theme color. I'm assuming the glow is like either the pink stuff or something like that, because the horn is like that and it's sort of like the outlines are that color, so I'm assuming that's what that means. I'm not sure what they mean otherwise though. A Shadow Guardian is a powerful godlike entity that, as a Kanza, is the protector of its species. There are currently no Shadow Guardians that exist in this dimension. So keep that in mind. Remember that it says in this dimension. So yeah, remember that it says Shadow Guardians that exist in this dimension, because that is very important for later. Kanza lives revolve around happiness. It's what allows them to maintain their bright, vivid colors. There are two important parts of happiness that make it work: sharing kindness and getting it back. If one part is missing, happiness will start to lose its meaning and the Kanza will turn gray, which I don't understand why it turns gray, because gray is sort of like the gray elder thing and the spots thing that they mentioned. They're different shades of gray are a sign of knowledge, so you wouldn't really be able to tell that that's happening because they're turning gray, so people would just think they're, you know, getting smarter or getting more advanced or whatever else. Which I find very interesting. I kind of get while there's like that limitation of like, you know, in Ponytown where you can't make something look like it's fading or something like that. But I feel like the lore should just straight up say that like they start losing color, they start becoming, you know, white, or they start, you know, all their colors start becoming duller or something like that. I think that's what it should be. I think it should just be, instead of them just turning gray, their colors should just turn into duller colors of themselves. And that would, I think, fix this little issue here where it's like, okay, is it Is it getting smarter, or is it, losing out on happiness or something? I don't know. It's gray, so I can't tell, that's the thing. But anyway, moving on, it says, however, there are also two different outcomes depending on how a Kanza is affected. So if we move on to scenario 1, it is not sharing happiness, or mean, whatever that means. As long as a Kanza is happy and makes others happy, they are fine. Their happiness keeps their color, and their influence on others keeps their health. Kanza that don't make others happy will be punished by losing their mark, becoming nearsighted, and if they stay that way for long, they will have a hearing problem and will slowly go blind. If it continues past that, they will eventually die of a heart attack. If they do change, however, they will not get their mark back and will stay with slightly faded colors, plus nearsighted, but not very bad. So this is like, okay, this can happen when they turn gray, but now it's saying that, like, they will stay with slightly faded colors if they're healed. So I kind of like that. I think this should be sort of copied over onto this, where it's like Kanza will turn gray. I think it should just say they will slowly start to, lose their color. Their colors will start to be slightly faded or whatever like that. It'll get more and more faded until they're just gone. And then this right here could just highlight the fact that even if they do heal, they will still have slightly faded colors. Maybe it will get a little bit more bright, but it will still stay slightly faded. And this is like a really nitpicky thing with that, what I just mentioned. But this next part is really confusing to me, because as we talked about at the very beginning of this entire document, if they don't get happiness or spread happiness, they fade away and die, just like Discord did in that one episode, which happens to be like one of my favorite episodes, by the way. I think it was like season 7, episode 7, maybe? I don't remember, but that's besides the point. Discord is supposed to fade slowly and slowly until he's no more. He just fades from existence. He doesn't have like a heart attack at a certain point and then just die there. And that's kind of what they were comparing it to. They were saying, like, you do this and then they will fade away like Discord does. But now they're saying if they don't, if it continues, they will die of a heart attack. Why did it change? Why did that really awesome thing change right here, right, like way into the doc sheet, where it's like the most important point to mention, how they fade away and everything like that, or die, I mean. Why did it suddenly change? I absolutely hate the fact that it suddenly changes and becomes contradictory to the original statement up above, where it was like, oh, they fade away at a certain point if they don't, do this happiness thing. So I find that very bizarre in my head, and it continues with scenario 2. So scenario 2, it says not getting kindness or being rejected. The opposite of what happens to the other Kanza. They might be nice to others, but if they're not happy, their colors will also fade. If it continues for too long, they will probably die from a heart attack. Once again, they're dying from a heart attack, some random natural cause, instead of fading from existence like the original statement basically said. Once they are happy again, though, their colors will come back, but all of the gray spots of them, including the mark, will become very dull, desaturated, but noticeable color fitting their theme. They might have slightly faded fur due to the experience, but all the results are marks of their rough past and show that they deserve respect. And then it shows this is star during and after depression, so it sort of shows that as an example. But moving back onto scenario 1, this is something else that I almost forgot to mention, but I hate it. It's really weird to me. This statement right here where it says Kanza that don't make others happy will be punished by losing their mark. I don't like the use of punished right here, because it implies that there's another force, another entity in making this happen. So it's sort of like this wording makes it seem like there's some sort of god or some kind of elder or some kind of shadow guardian or some kind of entity, some kind of creature, some kind of force that, I wouldn't call it a force, I would call it an entity, because it's an entity can punish, but a force can't really punish. That's besides the point. The point is, the word punished here makes it seem like there's some kind of entity watching over the Kanza, and if the Kanza don't spread happiness or be happy themselves, this entity will then punish them for not doing so, instead of it just being this sort of natural thing where it's sort of like, if they don't do this, it just kind of naturally happens. It just sort of happens where they lose their mark, they become nearsighted, etc., etc. I'm fine with these drawbacks to not doing these things. I'm totally fine with them losing their mark. I'm fine with them becoming nearsighted and, losing their hearing and going blind and things like that. I'm totally fine with that, but I don't like the use of the word punished here, because it makes it seem like there's some sort of god or some kind of entity watching over them and enforcing these rules on them, versus it just being a natural thing that they just naturally do and naturally are. I like the idea that, you know, they don't immediately lose their mark. Their mark just slowly fades. Their eyesight becomes, you know, slowly and slowly worse, and that their hearing slowly and slowly goes worse. Their vision slowly and slowly goes worse. But if they can recover, they can get some of that back. They can get some of it back, or it just stays where it was at that point in time. I like that idea, but again, the word punished there kind of hurts this like meaning and everything like that. It definitely makes it feel like there's some other creature, some kind of other entity, some kind of person that is enforcing these rules versus it just being a thing. So that would definitely be something that I changed, the word punish there. I think it should just say something like, Kanza that don't make others happy will eventually lose their mark, become nearsighted, etc., etc. That way it feels more like it's a natural cause versus it's just being something that someone else is causing them to do, like enforcing on them, I mean. So that is something that I almost forgot to mention, and I'm glad I didn't, because that was like, that's actually, I think, a very important thing to change. Anyway, we move on to their abilities and disabilities. Kanza get their powers and abilities from the theme of their color. Star's theme is galaxy/electric, as you can see here from the image earlier. Their theme will tell their power. Their theme will tell their power, weakness, energy source, and abilities. The way Kanza can use their abilities/powers depends on their theme, such as Ashley being able to use her fire abilities anytime she wants, so while they become weakened if she encounters water, and Autumn only being able to gain a lot of energy during the fall season. So this is something that I find very nitpicky in my own head, and I have no idea who Ashley is. I have no idea who this Autumn person is. This should have been, these characters should have been used as an example, either, you know, up above or at some point in this to kind of show it a little bit better. Like, hey, this is who this person is, or at least explain who that person is before you use them as an example. Which I find very weird. They could have just said, instead of such as Ashley, they could have said such as a Kanza that has fire abilities. They can use that whenever they want, but they will become weakened if they encounter water. They could have said something like that instead of using a person's name, because this is obviously an important person in the lore or something like that, an important character in the lore, I'm assuming, or at least some character in the lore, but I have no idea who this is because you're just now randomly mentioning this person, and I think that this should have been either, you know, this Ashley person should have been mentioned earlier. It should have showed us an example of this character. It should have made it a little bit more clear that this was a character and who they were before you use them as an example, because that just confused the heck out of me the first time I read this, and it bothered me a little bit. So it says here that there are 3 types of powers. Usable powers plus abilities. Ashley's fire abilities. I don't know what that means. I don't know the full extent of Ashley's abilities or anything like that, because again, you're using them as an example, and I don't know them. I don't know who this person is, so it's hard to use them as an example if I don't know who it is. It's sort of being like, oh, it's sort of like being the Avatar, but without ever knowing what Avatar Last Airbender is or something, which I don't know how you don't know, but that's besides the point. They have another type of power here called energy source, sort of like Autumn's hibernating during fall season to get more energy. They have no powers at all. That's the 3rd type, like Leo, Deanna, Silvertail, whose themes don't give them a special ability. Again, I have no idea who these 3 people are. Who are these 3 people? Why don't they have special abilities? Well, I mean, it's obviously because of the theme thing, but you're just using random people here. It doesn't have to say like these people. It could have said like people who don't have themes, or like people who have themes that don't give them special abilities. It could have done something like that instead of using, you know, 3 different characters who are probably important, probably staff on the lore team or some other thing like that. I don't know, but the fact that you use them as an example when we've never heard of them, don't know who they are, don't know what the characters look like or anything else, is just makes that a little bit more confusing than it needs to be. So anyway, all Kanza have energy that needs to be at a certain level. As I mentioned earlier, if it's too low, they'll just be extremely tired and will have to hibernate. And if it's too high, they'll probably be overloaded, have a seizure, and die. It's important for Kanza to be active. As for disabilities, every type is affected. A Kanza, like Frost, will be especially weak near lava or an excessive amount of fire, since she has ice abilities. Again, you're using a specific person. Sure, their name implies that they have frost-like abilities, frozen-like abilities, but you're not, like... It could have just said a Kanza with frost powers would be especially weak near an excessive amount of fire. It doesn't have to say a character's name, which is obviously the same name of their power, which is confusing in of itself, but instead of saying the character's name, just give us an example of a power. That way you can kind of explain that a little bit better, and not have to have, all of this extra space here, because it says that, will be especially weak near lava or an excessive amount of fire, since her abilities are ice abilities. You could have just said a Kanza with ice powers would be especially weak near lava or an excessive amount of fire, and then you would have removed this entire, like, how many words is that? That's like 5 words there. That would have been removed. Obviously, it's not going to help a whole lot to remove like 5 words, but there's many cases where you're giving an example of a character instead of a power, and that's making it a little bit more confusing than it needs to be. Anyway, Kanza hibernate when they run out of energy and can't recharge. So seasonal Kanza hibernate during the season to be able to get much more power while hibernating and have enough energy for the year. The Kanza with more powerful abilities, like anything to do with time, space, energy, etc., are usually forced to be constantly active, since those types of energies recharge way too fast and need to be exerted. Kanza with no abilities normally don't have many weaknesses. So if you have like no abilities, you're not going to really have that many weaknesses, because there's no like opposite element to fight you. Basically, this whole thing right here can be summed up in like maybe like 2 sentences, where it's like, basically, if you have fire, it's weak against water. If you have ice, it's weak against fire. If you use too much of your power, you have to hibernate or you'll die. So that's kind of like basically the whole thing. That's basically what this whole paragraph is trying to say. And it's sort of basic RPG type elements, where one element's more powerful than the other because they're sort of opposites. And obviously water's going to put out fire, things like that. It's all feels obvious. Moving on to this part here, and I think this is the last thing I'll talk about, is the Shadow Guardians. So it says the first Shadow Guardians. This is what chapter we're in. And this is the Kanza Shadow Guardian things. We mentioned those earlier. The Kanza not only get abilities from their own themes, but those who are worthy or more power can get it from 6 Kanza artifacts. There are 6 Kanza artifacts, each made by one of the first 6 Shadow Guardians. When I mentioned that there were none of them in this dimension, it was because Kanza are from a different one. Back on their home planet, in that dimension, there are great kingdoms and cities inhabited by Kanza. This I find a little bit irritating in the sense that they could have said it right at the top of the document that there is multiple dimensions, that they originally came from this one, whatever the name of this one is. They could have mentioned that, talked about that, and said there's multiple dimensions. We'll talk about it later in the first Shadow Guardians and everything like that. But I think it should have been pointed out at the very beginning that there's multiple dimensions, and there's like, these are the dimensions. Like every name of a dimension, it could have just said it, and it could have said which dimensions it was referring to instead of saying this dimension, because this dimension is very, very vague. When they say this dimension at the beginning of the document, there's technically no way to know if they're talking about this dimension that they're talking about here at this point in the doc and everything like that. So I think they should have named each of these dimensions and listed them out at the front, at the beginning of the document, saying, hey, there's X amount of dimensions. Here's each of them. We'll talk about them later, or something like that. You didn't have to talk about them right then and there, obviously, because you wanted to talk about types of Kanza first, which I think is important that you should talk about first. But I think right at the top, it should have listed the dimensions and left it there, and came back to it at this point in the document, where it could have said, this is why we were talking about dimensions earlier. This is the home dimension. This is where they all came from. Dimension Prime, whatever you want to call it. And this is what's happening in this one. It has great kingdoms and cities inhabited by Kanza and things like that. I think that is one of the main things that they should have mentioned early, because when I read this for the first time, I got to this part and I just stopped for a minute and I was like, wait, okay, that makes sense, but because you did keep saying this dimension, but why didn't you just name each of the dimensions and then tell us what dimension you were referring to? Because that made it way too confusing on the first read. But basically, it goes on to talk about a single elder rules every kingdom. Every 100 years, a group of new elders are chosen to train for the leadership. Once they are ready to rule a kingdom, the old leader steps down and travels to the Elder Palace, which is located on the other side of a hidden portal found at the core of the planet. Unlike Earth, their planet doesn't have lava inside, and lava is only located in the specific biomes. The top layer isn't like Earth's normal layer. The layer below it is an almost solid bedrock layer that has a few enormous caves. Under that layer is the layer above the core, the crystal cave layer. It's hard to navigate, and the crystals are sharp and unbreakable, so you have to be careful. The core is a void, and only elders are able to sense the portal, find it, and go through. So this is another thing too, where it's sort of like, I kind of get the whole sense of like it would be really hard to get here. It would obviously be really hard to find it if you couldn't sense where the portal was, etc., etc. But you can't tell me that there's not at any point someone that was like, I want to find this portal that these elders go through. I'm going to find it. And they go down to this core layer and they start hunting for it. They start searching for it. And they would probably find it, even if it was really well hidden. If someone was determined enough, they would find it. And that's why I think it should just be totally different. I don't think it should just be some random portal that's just sitting there hidden somewhere. I think it should be something that, you know, maybe the portal is just sitting there hidden somewhere, but only, you know, there's like a certain power that you have to use on the portal to get through or something like that. Or maybe some sort of specific power to use on the portal to activate it so you can then go through. Something that only the elders would be able to, you know, have the power of. Sort of like this, where it says only elders are able to sense the portal. Maybe only the elders can sense the portal and activate the portal, or something like that. I think that would have made a little bit more sense, and it would have made it easier for, you know, them to be like, okay, well, yeah, that's why no one's ever found it, is because even if they did find it, they wouldn't be able to go through because they don't have the power to go through, you know, something like that. And again, even if it was something like they had the right power to get through or something like that, someone who knew that the elder was about to, you know, pass on and go to the next dimension or something like that could have waited in that cave after finding it and then jumped in with them or something like that after they activated it. It could have been a million things like that. That's why I think it should have just been, you know, slightly different than how it is right now. And that is a little bit nitpicky thing, but it is something I wanted to mention because that there's like a lot of like tiny things like that in this lore that bothers me just a little bit, where it's like, yeah, someone else is totally just going to jump in there. There's no point in it even being hidden at this point because you can just jump in there if you find it. So, and someone is going to find it. There's going to be someone determined enough to find it, and there's going to be someone with enough power to be able to do that. But moving on. In the Elder Palace, Shadow Guardians control and watch over everything. Elders learn from Shadow Guardians, and there are 6 types of Shadow Guardians, all watching everything, but each taking care of a different aspect. So then it basically does like a whole Infinity Stones type thing, where it's like a Guardian of Power, red artifact, Guardian of Thunder, yellow artifact, Guardian of Souls, green artifact, Guardian of Reality, blue artifact, Guardian of Time, purple artifact, Guardian of Life, Silver Artifact, etc., etc. So, well, not etc., etc. Those are the only ones. And it talks about how the artifacts are rare, special, and only Kanza who are worthy of holding them can hold them. Anyone else will be destroyed. Again, much like the Infinity Stones. It goes on to talk about basically these Infinity Stones, what each of them do, such as the red one being able to, you know, be power and everything else, the yellow one, the green one. It talks about each of those and each of their powers and stuff like that. And it says that there's one prophecy that says that a Kanza who collects all the artifacts will start a new generation of Kanza and a new world. It is a mystery of what happened to the artifacts and the portal to that world. The old world still prospers without the artifacts, however, and the Shadow Guardians have started using their own abilities to grant immortality to the Kanza who will be future elders. There is one Kanza who wants to return the artifacts to where they belong, and one Kanza who wants to keep the artifacts in the new world. The rest of that story is unknown at the moment. And you may think that I'm going to talk about the whole the rest of the story is unknown at this moment thing, and talk about like how bad that is, or how, you know, that is uncreative or unfinished or this, that, or whatever. But I'm actually going to say that actually works really well, because the way I read this, it kind of feels like that history is currently unfolding at this moment. Like, this is what we know is happening, but we don't know what happened yet because it hasn't happened yet. It's currently happening, so we can't share it because we don't know it yet. It's sort of like different stories that you hear about World War II or something like that. While that was happening, while those stories were happening in World War II, those events happening in World War II, they weren't necessarily fully known as they are now, because now it's like this whole thing, it's in history books, etc., etc. And obviously, you know, this and that. The history was currently unfolding, so it wasn't as clear of an image of what was going on. Now it's so clear, we have hindsight, we can look back at it and everything like that. And that's sort of what this is. This current moment, this current story of you know, these people trying to get these artifacts and these people trying to keep the artifacts where they are, is sort of unknown because that story is currently unfolding, and I absolutely love that. I think it's really cool. I kind of wish it would say that story isn't known at the moment because it is currently unfolding or something like that, but I kind of like the way it is right now, and I think this is great. I think they have it in the bag for that. But yeah, I don't think there's really much else to talk about the The lore here, there's apparently butterfly and deer Kanza. I don't know why there's more variants. That's something that kind of bothers me a little bit, because it mentions earlier that there's only 3 variants, and now it's saying that there's butterfly and deer Kanza. Apparently they don't reproduce the same way the others do, and things like that. And it mentions how the first deer was created by Aspen and this person when they were young, and things like that, and just kind of talks about those for a bit and shows an example of them, etc., etc. And that is pretty much it. It talks about the Kanza goddess. Basically, the Kanza goddess is this character who was called Matilda, and they were the first and only rainbow Kanza, and they basically created the entire dimension. They used their imagination to create things, and they became real physical things from their imagination and things like that. And yeah, then it talks about the biomes, and then it just sort of ends off the whole doc sheet there. So if we actually go back to the Discord server, I think we can close off with my opinion on what they look like and everything like that. So if we actually scroll up a little bit and find their thing here, where is this thing at? Where is this? The creation rules. Let's go to that real quick, actually, because there's something I want to talk about here that I almost forgot. There's a creation lore rule thing here, and it's actually extremely confusing. I don't quite understand it, because it kind of starts out looking a little bit like a tutorial, like a normal tutorial, and then suddenly there's like this thing here where it's understanding hexadecimal and things like that, and I have no idea what the heck is going on. It just suddenly starts looking like some kind of math class and things like that. This is something that if I was interested in making a species of this character, or something like a character of this species, a Kanza character, let's just say that. If I was trying to make a Kanza character, I would get to this point and I would be like, I'm done, I'm not doing this. Because this just looks like a math lesson, like a math class where it's trying to teach you a certain thing, and if you don't do it right, then you're not making your Kanza right, or something like that. And that really truly bothers me, because they actually have a Kanza tutorial, and this tutorial is actually really easy to follow. It's just a typical tutorial, but once you get done with this tutorial, you also have to go to the creation rules, because there's creation rules, and double check before submitting it and everything like that. So while I do think that you could probably get away without ever even looking at the creation rules, you might not. So I don't like that. I don't like this weird creation rule where it uses some kind of weird math, like 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 6. What is this? What is going on with this? I'm so confused. This confuses the heck out of me. But moving back on to the Kanza and what they look like and everything like that, I do have some issues with their appearance and things like that, and that's where I'll leave things off. Is the Kanza, they don't look like a species. they just don't look like a species. All 3 of these characters each just look like some random character that someone made, and that was that. They just made it and they use it every now and again, and it's not some kind of species or anything like that. Literally, there's almost nothing that they all share. Like, they all share the same tail, but they're totally different between the 3. They each have wings, but the wings are obviously going to be different from each other, because you're going to decorate and design your wings differently from everyone. The paws, the claws, the hoof thing. I mean, I guess all of the feathered ones would have the claws or whatever, and a beak. But again, it's just such a generic, random Pegasus. Like, legit, if I had seen this character here, I would have just thought it was some random griffin character or something like that. It has a beak, claws, wings. I would have just thought it was some random griffin character or something. I wouldn't have thought anything more of it. Even if it had Kanza in the name, I would have said, oh, that was an interesting name for a griffin. Then I would have looked into it, then found out it was a species. But looking at any of these, even if there's like multiple of these feathered ones next to each other, I don't think I'm ever going to recognize that that's a species, just because of how generic it looks. It just looks like a Pegasus or a griffin or something like that. And same thing for the furred ones. It just kind of looks like a Pegasus with paws or something like that, or like a mouse or something like that. I don't know. And again, this version here, the neutral version, that's even more generic. This just looks like some random alicorn with like dog ears and face paint or something. I don't know. It just looks generic to me, and that's one of my biggest complaints about the species. Is it just looks so generic that it makes me not want to make one. Like, I don't want to make one because of how generic it is. But I think that's gonna do it for the thing here. I think that's gonna do it for everything. Let me look at the Kanza art. I want to look at the Kanza art and see if there's any kind of Kanza art. There's literally 0 Kanza art. I don't know why. I don't know why. But there's 0 Kanza art. But anyway, that is the that is the video. I do hope that you enjoyed. I do hope that you enjoy, you know, this in this huge new revive of Species in Depth and everything like that, because we're going to be doing more. Let me know in the comments below what species you want me to cover. I have a huge list already, but if you mention something that I didn't think of to check out, then I'll maybe check it out. Like I said, though, I have a huge list, so I'm not going to guarantee that I'll do it next, but I'll at the very least add it to my list. And this list, there's technically no waiting thing, so like if you comment one now, you're not gonna have to wait 30 species to get to yours. I'll probably just like what I do is I just pick some at random at this point, because there's no point in trying to figure out what order was what or whatever else. And plus, sometimes I want to talk about one kind of species, and other times I want to talk about other kinds of species. But anyway, that's gonna do it for the video. Like I said, comment below what you think of the Kanza, and let me know if you have any species ideas, species in depth ideas, anything like that. Let me know in the comments. And until next time, like, subscribe, share, and do all of those wonderful things, because when you do those wonderful things, you get access to wonderful content such as this. But that's not all you get. That's not all you get. You also get to become wonderful yourself, and I think we all want that. So do those wonderful things, and until next time, stay wonderful.